Today, I'm going to make this circular saw box to hang on the wall. Let's get into it. You know what stops me wanting to work in the shop at the moment? The mess. Currently, I have quite a few tools that just live on the table. They're in the way. So in this video, and probably the next one too, I'm going to make boxes to hold my circular saw, my jigsaw, my router and all of its friends. All of them. This project will be using scrap parts and will be roughly thrown together. I'm not aiming for this to be bang on, so bear that in mind as we get the measurements wrong and cut the wood to the wrong size. So we'll start with these square ply panels. They're big enough to hold the circular saw and then some, so the first job is to cut off the excess on all three pieces of the main body. First, I'll roughly mark the size of the saw against the ply to work out how wide the panels need to be before transferring that measurement to all three pieces. Then I remember it's easier to set up the rip fence and cut all three pieces so they all come out the same size. Once they're down to size, it's now a case of trying to put these pieces together while maintaining some structural integrity. I'm going to do this by gluing some of the offcuts onto the board to act like a stopper. I decided to be smart and fancy here, and it didn't work. I tried cutting a 45° into these boards so they would fit nicely. I set up the table saw without really looking, sliding the handle over to what I thought was 45° just for the video, and clamped it down into place. Turns out it was not 45°, which I didn't notice until after gluing things up. Cut twice and measure once, I think. With our stop block cut incorrectly and glued onto the base, I added two 45° cuts onto the top piece, one on the bottom, one on the top, so it would fit nicely against the backboard too. With some trial and error, I got all the pieces to sit nicely enough. I'm glad I didn't have to recut these. I marked a pencil line for reference so I know where these pieces needed to come back together. I cut another off piece to 45° and glued to the back of the piece to act as a hanger for the box. I decided that this box was already a bit of a mess, so I made the decision to stick it all together with some batons and screws on the inside instead of gluing it together. I would have glued it if it all fit together nicely, and therefore could have clamped it together, but that simply wasn't the case. I cut some batons down to size and started screwing them to the board, ensuring they were flush or just inside the board, so when I screwed another board to it, the corner is nice and tight with no gaps. And here I'm just making a dry fit to make sure that the batons don't bump into each other. I put a baton on the inside corner between the bottom piece and the back piece to try and aid with stability and screwed them together, where I completely missed the first time around. Good thing nobody except the wall will ever see this. With all the batons attached, it's time to mark out the sides. I decided to use as much of the scrap length of ply that I could, so I drew both triangles on that one piece. These were not easy cuts. The angles weren't great. I don't have any table saw jigs made up to help me out yet. I free-handed the cuts, which, I'm not going to lie, felt a little dicey. Not to say inaccurate. With the sides cut, it's now a case of screwing it all together. I drilled some pilot holes in the sides, ensuring they'd end up drilling into the batons. Now it's time to cut the slot for the saw. You might be tempted to just plunge the circular saw into the box. Yeah, don't do this. It's an awkward angle, it's dangerous, it's dumb. Just don't. So instead, we're going to mark a nice big hole for the saw to fit in and cut it out with a jigsaw. Would this have been easier before assembling it? Yes. Did I plan this out properly? Absolutely not. Is it a lesson learned? Well, hopefully. After noticing my first pilot holes were too small, I cut a bigger hole in the middle of the piece to fit the jigsaw blade in. Once we got the jigsaw in, we need to be careful to make sure that you drop as much of the cut into the box, never to be retrieved again. And that's that. This can now get mounted to the wall and free up some table space. This is a shop project, so I'm happy to leave it unpainted and unfinished, but I'm not your boss. If you decide to do this, do what you want. Fill it with pond liner if you want, it's all I seem to be doing these days. If you enjoyed the video, I'm glad I could help. Please consider liking, commenting, and all the other YouTube algorithm thingy-majoogies down below. It helps the channel a lot. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.